Okay, it's Nick Collier again, and it's story time. We're sitting in front of this pile of lumber that I had cut up a month and a half, 2 months ago. We had, probably 4 or 5 good-sized cedars either fell or were dangerously hanging over the house, and so we had them cut down. And, I just refused to throw good cedar away, so we stacked them up and had a saw guy come out and cut them up into boards. Now, all of this is cedar, and under me is, we had a maple that was hanging dangerously over the little cabin that we have on the property, and so I had that taken out and cut that up too. So we have a bunch of really good wood, and this next summer I'm going to be making a couple of decks and whatever else comes up. So anyhow, that's the stash. We've got it folded back because it's February, mid-February, and I can't believe it. I'm in short sleeves. So, I don't know what's going on, but hopefully we're going to get some weather come in here. It's been like this for about 3 weeks now, so hopefully good weather, good rainy weather will come in. No snow, please. So this story goes back, maybe 10, 12 years. We had a little extra money one winter. We decided, hey, we're going to just close up shop and pack it up and jump on a plane and go down to Baja, Mexico. So we'd been to Baja a number of times over the years, and we decided this time we were going to fly into Laredo, Laredo, Mexico, which is about halfway up Baja on the peninsula. So we fly into Laredo. It's this cute little town. We hang out for 3 or 4 days, and we decide, let's go further north. So we jump on a bus, and it's one of those Greyhound style buses, really nice, and we take it on up, not like the bus in the Yucatan, Mexico. It was a nice bus. We just rode it up, probably a couple 100 miles north to Mulege, which was this cute little Mexican village right next to this river that went out into the bay and then went out into the Sea of Cortez. So we land there and we find this nice little room. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better room. I mean, it was funky, typical Mexican style. But you walked out of the door of the room, and the little building sat kind of up on the hill, overlooking town. You just looked out over town. You had this nice, big, wide kind of roof that we could walk out on. It was great. So we booked the room and we're settling in, and it becomes, probably, mid-afternoon, late afternoon, and we decide to go for a walk down into town. And, every little Mexican town, even the big ones, have a central plaza where everybody meets. And so we went to this little plaza, and we're just hanging out in the plaza, watching people come and go, and there's kids on skateboards, and in Mexico, whatever happens. There's nobody putting up signs, no skateboards or anything like that. So we're watching this whole thing unfold, and we're noticing that there's a kind of a crew working at the far end of the little plaza. And a plaza's the size of half of the size of a football field. Good size. And they're setting up these giant speakers, and we think, oh man, what's going on? You know, they're going to have some kind of party here tonight. And I mean, these speakers were, you know, 12, 14 foot tall, and there was like 6 or 8 of them around in this big circle. And I thought, well, you know, hey, they'll wing out until 10, 11 o'clock, and everything will be fine. They'll shut down, and everybody will go home. So I, you know, I just kind of braced myself for whatever kind of music was going to come out, and so we went to dinner. We enjoyed ourselves. We went back to the room by 7, 8 o'clock, and just about the time we get back to the room, the music starts, and it's like this thumping, you know, modern young people music. And you know, hey, I guess it was okay. It wasn't my kind of music, but you know, I'm an old guy. What do I know? So the music goes on, and you're hearing people screaming and yelling and clapping and me dancing around. And we walked out and looked down onto the park, and man, the park was just filled with people. And we thought, well, I thought, well, you know, it's going to go on until 10, 11 o'clock, maybe even midnight, and it'll be fine. You know, just kind of go with the flow. 10, 11 o'clock comes around. I mean, this has not stopped. You know, and the whole room just is thumping. Boom, 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 boom. And it's kind of a, you know, they go from, you know, rap music to this Mexican polka, and you know, the speakers are up full blast. I mean, there's like, I can't believe that people down there's ears weren't just completely blown out. And it's 11, 12 o'clock, it's still going. 1, 2 o'clock, it's still going. 3, 4 o'clock, it's still going. I'm like, yeah, beside myself. You know, we're not getting any sleep. We're just sitting there. We finally just like get out on the little veranda and just look at the stars and listen to the crazy Mexican music, young people music. Somewhere around just when the sun is coming up, it finally cuts loose, and they turn the thing off, and it's like, oh, okay. So we go back into our room and we settle in and fall asleep until about noon. And when we wake up, we decide, well, you know, we got to go get something to eat. So we, you know, get dressed and get ready to leave, and we go down to the you know, receptionist, and it's this little Mexican lady, and she was very friendly, and she apologizes. She says, we're sorry. And I said, well, you know, hey, it is what it is. And she goes, it's if we don't bring the music in, the young people are going to leave. So we have to bring the music in about once a month so that the young people will stick around. And I'm like, oh man, that's got to be tough. She says, they'll all go. They're mostly all gone. So I kind of accepted that. So we go down into town. We have a nice breakfast. We walk through the village for the first time, really, because it's the next day, and we see this this tour guide, you know, business. It says, we'll take you up to the Mulege River. And I'm thinking, wow, that sounds pretty cool. And we're kind of looking for something to do, so we booked the tour. And the tour guide says, okay, it starts first thing in the morning. It's going to be an all-day thing, so be prepared for that. And so, you know, we're happy. We paid for the tour, and we're booked in the van, and we're ready to go. Next day comes around, we got a good night's sleep that night, no problem. Next day comes around, we show up at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and we walk into the little tour place, and she says, okay, everything's ready. Let's go through the back door, and here's the tour bus. And I'm thinking, it's a full-size bus with, 40, 50 people in it, and we're going to tour up back in the, up some highway and walk up into some river or something like that. Well, it's not. It's like an Econoline van, a little Ford van. It's not little, but it's big. It'll handle, I think there was 8 of us. And they stuffed us in there, 8 of us. And I was like, okay, let's go. And so the guy starts the engine and he takes off. And we go through town and we go kind of out this back road that is pavement for about, 3 or 4 or 5 miles out. And, by the way, he stops at a fruit stand, his cousin's fruit stand, and says, oh, hey, let's go all get out and hang out at the fruit stand, and you go ahead and buy some fruit, and typical, stopping at some place that to help out that economy. So we all get out, we buy some fruit, and we get back in, and we take off. And we're kind of going. And just about that time, the road goes from pavement to gravel. And I'm thinking, well, that's fine. We got the windows rolled up. He's got the air conditioner on. It's in Mulege, and it's in the middle of winter. So it isn't super hot. It's just kind of warm out. And so he's driving back into this back country. And we just keep going, and the road keeps getting narrower and narrower and narrower and rougher. And after a while, he's driving down into potholes and driving back out of them. And the van is banging around, and we're all like, I'm getting car sick. And luckily, for some reason, he knows that people are going to get car sick. So he pulls over about every, 20 minutes, half hour, and he lets everybody get out and take a break. And and then we get back in, and sure enough, we go to an even narrower road. And after a while, we're literally driving, and we're going out into the desert too, by the way. It's just pristine desert, just beautiful desert. But we're driving down into these little canyons and crossing this little creek. Well, a creek, it's a creek when it rains. It's basically just gravel creek bed, and climbing back out of the creek bed. And literally, we are in places where you shouldn't drive a car. You should drive a 4-wheel drive Jeep, right? A 4-wheel drive Jeep would make it. But he's got this Econoline van sliding down these ravines and crossing over and climbing back out of these ravines, and then back into the next ravine, and maybe driving a mile down the creek bed, and then back out and up. And we finally start to climb into the hills here, and he finally gets up to this one spot, and you look out onto the vista. And it's just like desert, just beautiful desert, all the way out. And the flowers are blooming, and oh man, it's just beautiful. And so he pulls over and he parks. He goes, okay, well now we're going to go look at the petroglyphs. And I'm thinking, petroglyphs? That wasn't part of the tour. But hey, let's go look at them. And so we literally climb these huge boulders. The size of a car or a truck, and some of them are the size of a bus. And we just he's got the path all figured out, and he just kind of leads us up, and it's not too bad of a climb, but we're climbing up and up and up onto this cliff edge. And at this cliff edge, there, all the way up, by the way, were boulders that had petroglyphs on it. And it was like, we'd stop and he'd point at some petroglyphs, and he'd talk a little bit, and he had some broken English that he could speak, and he'd kind of give us an idea of what the petroglyph was about. And he told us that they were about 10,000 years old. And I was like, wow, cool, chiseled right into the rock. and the rock was this black kind of basalt material. It was, pretty dense. So we climb all the way up to the top of the cliff, and at the top of the cliff, overlooking this spectacular valley, maybe a 20-mile view, along the top of the cliff, there's a whole series of petroglyphs, just like, the cliff is pretty much a straight piece of rock, and at the top, 20 feet up, you could see the petroglyphs. And he explained them, and he explained that what had happened was, at some time in the last 10,000 years, the cliff fell, and it, and you look down, and it's like this huge rubble pile, and all of the petroglyphs are, on all of the rocks going down. It was pretty spectacular. And at that point, I thought, okay, I got my money's worth. It was pretty cool. So he says, okay, let's go. This is after about an hour or so, and he says, okay, let's go. So we climb back down, we get back in the van, we drive, follow our route back down into these little canyons and back up over these summits and back down into these little canyons. We're talking, by the time we get to out of the canyon land area, it's probably noon or 1 o'clock. And he drives up on top of this hill, and here's this little shed. I mean, with goats and chickens, and he pulls the van right up to the shed, and he's, okay, let's have some lunch. And I'm thinking, lunch? Where are we having lunch? And literally, it's a shed. It couldn't have been 20 feet by 10 feet. Well, I don't even think 20 feet, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. It was really small. But there was a nice little bench sitting right there, and he said, okay, sit down at the bench. And lunch was part of the tour. So we sit down, and this little Mexican woman, his wife, by the way, and a couple of kids, she brings out a big batch of tortillas and all kinds of, stuff to go in the tortillas, and we just made our own tortillas, and it was just like, oh man, it was the best. It was spectacular, handmade everything, and so we had a really good lunch, and then we get back in the van. And he says, okay, we're going to go a little bit further. So he drives back through the desert again, driving around cactus and down into little canyons, and finally we get to some kind of a road, and we drive along this road, and you could see a fence line, and at the end of the fence line he makes a left turn, and these two guys that obviously had just woken up or something stand at the fence line at the gate with two AK-47s or whatever kind of rifle. I mean, it was a serious rifle, and they like pointed at us, and they, and the guy says, okay, everybody calm down, just take it easy, and don't give them any problems. If they want us to get out of the van, we got to get out of the van. He's like, okay. All right, get out of the van. So we open the door and get out of the van, and the two guys, they tear through the van while we're standing there, and they frisk us, and I'm like, whoa, man, and it felt kind of dangerous. But it all worked out, and the little Mexican guy, the driver, he slips some money to the soldier, and everybody seems to be happy. We all get back in the van. After about 20 minutes, we all get back in the van and close the door, start the engine, and drive through the gate. And everybody's waving goodbye, and he explains to us that the route that we're on is the drug route. They bring drugs in from that back route. Well, not that particular one, but there was a whole series of them, and they bring them in on different routes. And so they had these guards at all of these fence line gates. And we made it through. So we're driving for another 10-15 minutes, and this guy pulls up, and I'm noticing off in the distance this kind of, not cliffs, but hills. So he drives up further, and he finally parks right at the base of these hills, and here is this river coming out of this canyon. And, you know, the canyon wasn't huge. It was maybe, 200 or 300 feet tall, and maybe a couple hundred feet wide. And this little river was coming out. Maybe the river had, 20 or 30 gallons per minute coming out of it. So it was basically a trickle. So he says, okay, let's walk up the canyon. And I was like, well, okay, that sounded pretty good. He says, but leave things behind that you don't want to get wet, because we're going to have to get in the water several times. And I'm like, okay, no problem. I leave my stuff in the van thinking, well, maybe this is a setup, but it wasn't. Anyhow, he leads us back into this canyon, and we literally, there's one pool after another pool after another pool, and they're pristine. It looked like nobody had been there for millennia. But of course, I'm sure that people were there all the time. We didn't see anybody. So, and we're walking up the canyon, kind of jumping over rocks and stuff, and finally he says, okay, we got to get in the water. So we get in the water and we swim over to the other side, and 100 yards or so, no big deal, and get out and walk further into the canyon. We must have walked and swam, maybe a mile and a half back, and it was spectacular. There were, cactus growing on the little areas on both of the walls, and trees, and it was just beautiful. And it was silent, and all of our people were silent too. There wasn't a bunch of chatterboxes. So we're walking back in this beautiful canyon, and it's just perfectly silent. And he walks us up to this one beach, and the beach is kind of, goes up to the base of the cliff, and we walk up to the base of the cliff, and on the cliff are handprints, and there must be 100 of them, different sized, and they're all pure white, and they're handprints right on the cliff. And it was like, wow. And he says those handprints are 10,000 years old. And I'm like, man, that is beautiful. He says that what they used was, there was a mineral in that area that would hold up, and so they mixed up that mineral with something, and put their handprints on the wall. And so here's this pristine cliff wall with these handprints at about 5 feet high. And it was pretty spectacular. We sat there and had a little snack, and from that point on, it was a pretty spectacular day. We got back in the van and rode home, but it was that had been the climax of the day, and it was just probably one of the most spectacular canyons that I'd ever seen. I've been to the Grand Canyon, and it is pretty amazing, but this little canyon was pretty cool. So that's our story for now. This is Nick Collier. Checking out.